How Groundhog's Garden Grew by Lynn Cherry. Little Groundhog was hungry. Beautiful, scrumptious, irresistible, he exclaimed as he crept into a neighbor's lovely vegetable garden. He was nibbling on some fresh green lettuce when Squirrel rushed down from her tree. Little Groundhog, Squirrel scolded, "This food does not belong to you. If you take food that belongs to others, you will not have a friend in the world. Why don't you plant your own garden?" "I'm sorry," Little Groundhog told her, embarrassed, "but I didn't know how." "Well then," replied Squirrel, "I will show you." "First you will need seeds," said Squirrel. Little Groundhog helped Squirrel and her friends pick beans and peas from pods and seeds from sunflowers. Drooping head, they collected seeds from inside peppers, cantaloupes, cucumbers, and tomatoes. Squirrel chewed a hole into a pumpkin and handed Little Groundhog the gooey seeds, saying, "We'll dry these in the sun, then we can plant them in the spring." Groundhog November snow flurries told Squirrel that winter was on its way. "Sweet dreams, Little Groundhog," Squirrel said as she curled up in her tree hole. "See you in the spring," Little Groundhog said, snuggling into the deep earthen burrow as winter snows blew. Little Groundhog and Squirrel slept. In February, Little Groundhog awoke and drowsily ambled up to the burrow entrance. Weeks later, he awoke with a start. "It's spring," he shouted, and up he scuttled to the burrow entrance. There he met Squirrel carrying the burlap sack they had filled with potatoes and the tins of seeds. "Rise and shine," Squirrel said. "It's planting time. Look, the potatoes are sprouting. First we'll cut them into little pieces with 2 sprouts each. Then we'll plant them with their sprouts pointing up and cover them with soil. Each sprout will grow into a new potato plant. Next fall we'll dig new potatoes out of the ground. Now let's find a sunny place for your garden." When they found a good spot, Squirrel told Little Groundhog, "First, we need to dig in the soil to loosen it up." Next, they planted the cut-up potatoes. Then they dug rows and sprinkled 10 carrot, beet, and parsnip and radish seeds. "All these vegetables will grow under the ground," Squirrel told them, "so we call them root crops." They covered the seeds with dirt and gently watered them at the end of each row. Squirrel stuck markers to help them remember what they had planted. Squirrel told Groundhog, "Plants need lots of sun. We'll plant taller vegetables in the back." So behind the row of root crops, they planted seeds of tomatoes, peppers, and leafy greens. "Some vegetables grow on vines," said Squirrel. She pounded stakes into the ground for the pea and bean plants to climb. The next day, Squirrel said, "Let's visit my garden. I want to show you the plants that come up year after year all by themselves. They're called perennials." Sure enough, shoots of raspberries and asparagus were already poking up to the ground. Squirrel dug up a frilly young asparagus plant for Little Groundhog's garden. She told him, "You'll need to wait 3 years before this asparagus has nice black stems to eat." Little Groundhog said, "Thank you. I'm off to plant my perennials." Little Groundhog watched every day, waited and watered his garden. Then one day tiny seedlings emerged. "What a wonder!" he exclaimed. Little Groundhog pulled up a few seedlings and looked at them. The peas, the beans, and all the seeds had split open. From each a root grew down and a shoot grew up. Little Groundhog transplanted some seedlings where they had more room to grow. Wren and Praying Mantis said to Little Groundhog, "If you promise not to harm us with bug spray, we birds and insects will help you with your garden." "We will eat the harmful insects that hurt your plants," Little Groundhog promised. As the weeks passed, plants grew and blossomed. Bees, flies, and butterflies came to eat the sweet nectar and carried pollen from flower to flower. They told Little Groundhog, "The wind, the rain, and we insects pollinate your flowers so they can become fruits and vegetables." Little Groundhog noticed But after a flower was pollinated by an insect or by the wind, its petals dried up and fell off. Underneath was the smallest beginning of a tiny vegetable. A tiny tomato, a tiny cucumber, a pepper, an eggplant, a pea pod, a zucchini. So this is how a garden grows, little Groundhog cried jubilantly. Tomatoes turned red, heads of cabbage grew, a sunflower seemed to explode from the top of a tall stalk. Snap peas, string beans, peppers, lettuce, and a chard grew. Under the warm sun, little Groundhog rejoiced. He ate his very own vegetables, plain and fresh from his very own garden, all summer long.